Yeah, remember the name, Jas Takhar, best in the game. Mamba mentality in his own lane, so better pay attention to what he be saying. Get the message, ain't no question, giving advice for any investment. Welcome to the broadcast, the Jas Takhar Podcast.
I wanted to have you on because I've been telling a lot of people that I've been meeting offline where my podcast is going to start shifting to. And the podcast is going to start shifting to a place where I want to educate people, bring guests on so they can inform my viewers and listeners on all aspects of creating wealth. I personally believe that real estate is one of the best. I don't think it's the only way to create wealth. I think the best investment in general is the investment into yourself. But then there's this whole world in mutual funds, stocks, building businesses. And then of late, there's this whole new thing called a blockchain and crypto and Bitcoin and then NFTs. And one of the reasons I started this podcast 3.5 years ago, we're in episode 211, I think this one might be, is because I wanted to showcase me being curious, asking questions, allowing the viewers and listeners to come along on the journey and learn along the way. And so I think this episode for me is going to be one of my favorites, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm going to be very curious today, because I know maybe 3% about the world that you're in. And so for everybody who's driving right now, taking their dog for a walk or on the treadmill, I got a good looking, handsome man sitting beside me. His name is Stephen Sargeant. What do you do? And, give that comic book story, origin story of yourself. And then we're going to go into blockchain 101. For 98% of my people, I know they're like me. They have no clue about it. They've heard these fancy words, but what the hell is it? What does it mean for them? And then I kind of want to go into 102 of that conversation, meaning where can they possibly see opportunities for themselves to maybe create wealth? Because a lot of my viewers and listeners have that entrepreneurial mindset. They're real estate investors, they're real estate agents, but a lot of business people. So do your thing, Stephen, like that comic book origin story, brother.
I love it. First of all, I think it's important to know that we're only going to get more digital. I've heard a lot in the last couple of weeks about blockchain, cryptocurrency. It's dead. All these banks are failing that are housing or financing crypto companies. We had FTX happen, so that was a huge loss to the industry. But we're only going to get more digital. I think that's something that people have to understand. We're not going to go back digitally. And I think from my origin story, I started out as a paralegal, to be quite honest. And I was working at D&H, so it's a company in Canada, cutting all the checks for the big banks. That was a check company. But they realized, just like anyone, we're only going to get more digital. They started actually buying up a lot of fintech companies. So that was back in May of 2015. And I reached out to the president. I'm like, what can I do better in my job? And he's like, well, learn about fintech. So then I was like, okay, started listening to podcast after podcast, and everyone was talking about Bitcoin and blockchain.
One sec. What's fintech?
Fintech is financial technology.
Okay.
So think of your traditional bank and then adding in elements. You're seeing the Wealth Simples of the world. Using innovation to kind of power this financial services.
What the Tangerines, aka the ING Directs from back in the day, would that qualify as fintech or not really? Because there's a digital component to it. There's no bricks and mortar or mortar to those type of banks. Will that qualify or no? Or is it more the wealth simplies of the world?
I think more of the Wealth Simples. I think what they did is they kind of moved away from the brick and mortar.
Yep.
But I think what these fintech companies are more doing is more digital access, more innovation. They have the blockchain, they have the cryptocurrency access to it.
Yep.
Whereas I think ING was a very good example of taking the original model and kind of doing something a little bit different that nobody had seen before, making it easier to access and a lot cheaper for
I still people. Use that, just a side note for everyone, because I'm so, because majority of my media crew is south of 30. And so I'm always worried about them, what the hell they're doing with all the money that they're making with me on the side and all that stuff. And so I tell people hey, put away at least minimum 20% of your income. And the easiest and best way to do that is don't ever touch that money. the easiest and best way to do that is connect with like a Tangerine where they automatically take the money from you. You can get it, but it's a little tougher. Like it takes 2-3 days, and at least within that 2-3 days, hopefully you start to get a little bit of buyer's remorse and say, maybe I don't need those kicks. Maybe I don't need that new hoodie like my girl Ro always does. You know what I mean? Like she's always buying new clothes and stuff. Maybe no. No, you're not. Oh, I don't know. Sometimes you are, Roro. Where like you have that time to say, okay, you know what? I'm not gonna spend the money. But go, buddy.
Did you get hooked on ING when they had like 12% interest? You remember if you opened up a bank account? This was way back, probably like 20 years ago.
So I was with ING. I'll tell you right now. No. I started with ING. My first year in car sales, which would have been post 9/11, so 2002.
Yeah.
My guy there, my sales manager there, told me right away, like, put your money into this, and I did, and I don't know if it was 20%, but bro, it used to be like 5-6%.
Yeah, they used to have
like on a regular savings account, right?
Yeah. I think when I got
now it's kind of
it's even
balanced out, whatever. But continue.
Yeah, but anyway, so I'm and then as a paralegal, I'm like learning about crypto, blockchain. This was when Bitcoin was at like $600, just to give you kind of a reference. It's probably pretty low now, but it's went up to as high as $60,000. And I was like, I don't really want to be a paralegal anymore. I want to get into cryptocurrency, but I had no sales experience, no tech experience. So I reached out to one of the podcast hosts, and within 10 minutes, he sent me a list of things I could do to get into cryptocurrency from a compliance angle. Okay. He's like, hey, you have a legal research and writing background, try the compliance angle. He'd been in payments for decades, so he knew that regulations were coming. And this is 2015. We still haven't even seen full regulations, but he knew it was coming. So I did all the things he did. I took the exams, the certifications to become an AML officer, started out my career at HSBC, but I always wanted to get into crypto. So I think a lot of your audience, I started creating content on LinkedIn.
I'm going to stop you again because I want to make sure people understand how much of a 101 I want this to be. AML, what does that stand for?
Anti-money laundering.
Perfect.
So when the bank asks you 100 questions about why you're depositing $1,000 in cash.
I hate that shit. I understand it, but I hate it. It's my money.
All AML related. They don't really care what you're doing. They want to make sure that they're covering their ass to make sure you're not, a drug lord that's depositing money mule funds from drug trafficking.
So you take all these certifications and now you're thinking to yourself, okay, are you still at the was it DHL? Sorry,
no, I'm at HSBC.
Now. HSBC.
So I'm at the big bank doing AML. But I started creating content on LinkedIn about cryptocurrency, AML. Just like today, there's always going to be.
Why did you penalty. Do that? What made you do the content?
I was big on Gary Vee earlier. I'm not going to lie. And one of the things that stuck out to me, I was reading all the books about mindset, and he came on one day and he's like, you're reading because you don't want to do. So I was like, as I got into AML, I did a podcast in 2017. I was like, hey, I'm new to this industry. This is what I like. Here's cryptocurrency. And then I started working at one of the biggest exchanges in the world because they needed AML officers. I was talking about crypto and AML, and they're like, hey, do you want to come and join our team?
I mean, the reason we're sitting here in a studio right now that I kind of built out with the team that we have, I mean, you see that we have somebody on camera, and then we have people who are doing behind the scenes stuff. That's completely ripped off from Gary Vee. Yeah. So I love the fact that I didn't even know that that's where it started for you. But it just goes to show that if you can find someone that has left clues that where they were successful, it's your job just to pick up those clues and kind of reverse engineer it. I mean, you're looking at two gentlemen that did that, are doing it, and are definitely going to continue doing the same thing, right?
It makes sense. And I think, especially if you're in conservative industries, like legal industries, compliant, those are boring, right? Nobody's going to be like, oh my God, comply. So I was able to take some of the culture, some of the swag I had from... I'm
so glad that you mentioned that because you bring a lot of energy to it. Like if, for everybody who's watching right now, right after this episode's done, but in the episode links, you'll see all of Stephen's contact info. What's the podcast name as well?
Right now, I'm actually producing a podcast
for
analysis called The Public Key.
Okay, perfect. And then you got to check out this guy on LinkedIn. I mean, I think you're one of the best locally that are doing it right now because you're right, man. This stuff could be a little boring, but you bring your flair to it and your swag to it for sure.
I'm lucky because I do compliance with crypto. So you can always add a little bit of the crypto stuff, which is a lot more exciting. Nobody cares about like T-bills and bonds, but they do care if you get wrecked on an NFT and lose, $10,000 investing in the wrong cryptocurrency.
So I want to talk about NFTs a little bit later, but let's go to blockchain. So what the heck is this blockchain thing?
It's basically just a distributed ledger. So just think of records are included in these things called blocks. But the thing about these blocks is that the next block that's being manufactured actually has a timestamp and a reference to the previous block. So if you tried to change information in one block, it would then affect the preceding blocks. And it's open and public, and which also means it's decentralized. So that means that there's no government, there's no bank, there's no centralized authority that can actually stop these from transactions or intervene with these transactions from happening, which is important, right? So, and I think the best way to describe it for your real estate agents is, think of the MLS that only real estate agents have access to. And imagine that there wasn't a centralized authority and everyone could see the transactions that you're doing, the costs of the homes, everything. It's like an open and transparent ledger that keeps track of the information, and more importantly, it's timestamped.
So why is that important though, from a money perspective? Like if I transfer you money on the blockchain, like where does it go? Like, I think about my mom when we started doing email transfers. She was like, I'll never send an email transfer because I need my passbook, right? Like back in the days, I need to make sure that I see where the money goes. And the kids in the room are like, what the fuck is a passbook? Like we used to have these things even before statements used to come out. So what happens if, can I transfer money through the blockchain?
You can transfer cryptocurrency like Bitcoin through the blockchain. It never leaves the blockchain. You can cash out of it, but you're basically just think of it like a vault. And you have gold blocks in these vaults. You have access to your own address. You can unlock the vault and you can transfer that gold to another party that has their own vault, and that's where they stay, which makes it almost tamper-proof.
Elaborate on that. Why almost tamper-proof?
Well, it's tamper-proof in the sense as nobody's able to hack the Bitcoin blockchain. But just like having a vault in a bank, you can go after the centralized authorities that keep the vault of Bitcoin, because those are susceptible to hacking. Those are susceptible to bad actors.
Okay, now...
in reference to that, like crypto exchanges, like a Coinbase is susceptible to a hack, but the Bitcoin blockchain is not.
Okay, so let's go back to the decentralization of it. Do you see this getting centralized, like the government getting involved? Like how long do you believe that, the American government specifically, and we here just in Canada kind of follow suit what they do, is not like they're going to start to get involved in this? I would think like there's too much shit happening here. There's too much money being transferred. It's not being taxed from what I understand, but maybe you can touch on that as well. Like how long do you think that might last?
Now they are regulating in the sense that they're regulating the on and off ramps. So you can't regulate Bitcoin. It's a peer-to-peer network and it's decentralized. But now if I send you Bitcoin, you're like, great, I like Bitcoin, but I also need cash to pay all my staff. I need to go to an exchange or a bank to transfer that Bitcoin into cash. That's where the regulators are sitting there and they're waiting with decentralized. And that's why there's so much push and regulations on centralized exchanges. But if I said, hey, I'm a nefarious actor and I want to send you Bitcoin with our personal wallets, there's nothing that the government can do to intervene until we need to cash out or until we need to kind of like retroactively, they need to go back and figure out, well, where did you get this Bitcoin from? Oh, you got it from Coinbase. They subpoena Coinbase and say, well, give me all the KYC information of the person that sent this transaction.
Okay, KYC meaning know your client.
Know your client,
okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of the blockchain, do I start like an account? Like how does that, take me right back to the start. Like how do I get started with this?
You can create an address. There's wallet service providers. You create your own wallet and then you'd have to fund it somehow. So you'd have to go to one of these on and off ramps to send your fiat funds in, convert it to cryptocurrency, and then either you have your wallet on the exchange or you have your own personal wallet on like a hardware wallet device like a Ledger or a Trezor.
And what's some common, when you say wallet, you're talking about like a virtual wallet, obviously. And like digitally, I apologize. What are some that are common that you're comfortable with, for example?
Like MetaMask is one that a lot of people will use.
That's the one that I hear about the most.
Because it's used to purchase NFTs. That's where you're going to have Ethereum stored. That's a lot of the transactions to purchase NFTs. You need a MetaMask type wallet.
Okay.
Most people just keep their wallet at the exchanges. It's easy. You can deposit funds. You can withdraw the funds easy. The only problem is if something happens to the exchange, like what happened with FTX, and the exchange collapses, then your money's gone, unfortunately, because these banks are not insured. Sorry, these crypto exchanges are not insured like banks are insured.
So let's talk about FTX, because that was obviously in the headlines about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and it was everywhere. What happened there, like from your perspective?
I think it was just a mismanagement of funds. So basically, they were using customers' funds to finance some of their operations. They were making big bets. They were loaning out funds, and they were borrowing funds against a collateral, a token that they had created that really wasn't as valued as high as people thought it was. And then when they realized that the token's not really valued that high, it like kind of misshaped their collateral. And then basically everyone's funds is gone because they were using actual customers' funds, which you're not really allowed to do in a centralized bank situation.
And now, Stephen, just out of your, like from your perspective again, brother, like, do you think we're going to be in a place, you know, at the time of this recording, we're sitting in spring of 2023 almost. And do you think we'll be at a place where we will be buying everything kind of through the blockchain? Like even, you mentioned the staff, for example, like when I got to pay them in cash. You think there might be a place in the next year, 5 years, 25 years where they'll actually get paid through the blockchain?
And there's a lot of people that do get paid through their blockchain, especially in like third world countries. Like if you're in Argentina, I know a person in Argentina, they receive it's easier to get through Bitcoin than sending wire transfers, especially when it's small amounts. But decentralization is kind of the concept of being your own bank. I'm not ready to be my own bank. If I wake up tomorrow morning and I see $15,000 charged from Holt Renfro on my credit card, I don't want to be responsible for that. I want to call my bank and say, hey, those are illegal charges. This is what happened. They refund the money and I can move on. When you're your own bank, you're responsible for your life savings. And the problem with that is that there's still illicit actors that are on these blockchains, that are watching these accounts, watching you move funds around, and they're able to like send you ransomware or other ways to kind of get access, get your private keys to that vault and withdraw the funds. So until people feel comfortable owning their own money and being their own bank, I think we're in Web 2.5. So Web 3 being fully decentralized, Web 2 being like, hey, we like to use banks. Web 2.5 is like, hey, if I want to go buy an NFTs and I want to venture off in that decentralized world, I can, but I still have the comfort of a Web 2 infrastructure where I can still call the bank if somebody interrupts my money flow.
Okay, now, you know, you've said a couple of things where I'm going to, you know, take the conversation into NFTs very, very shortly. But I want to talk about a couple of things you said. Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. What's the difference between those? Like, is
Bitcoin's a type of cryptocurrency, and I had this image in my head. It's like me saying, hey, Jas, I want to buy a property.
Okay.
You're like, great. You want a single family home, you want a duplex, you want a commercial property. So I use properties like the same as cryptocurrency.
Love it.
Where there's several different options, where Bitcoin is probably your single family home, which is the most common, but you have all these freehold townhouses, fractionalized ownership. You have all these other options and all the other features that go along with it. But that's the best description I had.
And I love it. I love the analogy. Is Bitcoin like the most trusted right now? Is that the big boy in town? Like,
I think Bitcoin's the most well-known, has the biggest market cap. Ethereum is another great one because it's smart contracts. You can actually program certain information in there so that if certain things happen, it will transfer funds. So if me and you got into a deal to buy a property, and we were in escrow and you had to do a certain thing in order for the funds to be released to me, then you can actually build that into the smart contract that if you don't do that thing, the funds could automatically go to me. The problem with smart contracts is it's really dumb, right? So let's just say you're a day late. Those funds are going to come to me. There's no leniency. And you see that similar to like tenant and landlord, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a little bit late for your rent, you don't want the doors to automatically lock for the tenant. There's no leniency there, but they do have smart contracts that can be actually programmed into the money. And
like currently what's happening with Bitcoin from what I've just seen, I have like zero Bitcoin right now, but I'm very interested. And I'm going to start to move my money around a little bit because I like to have some decentralization in my portfolio, right? Especially with things that I saw that happen. If you agree or disagree with what happened with the protests in Ottawa, but the fact that the government was able to freeze accounts so quickly, that kind of concerned me a little bit. And people just didn't have access to their money, right? Again, I'm not here. You know, I have my own opinions and thoughts around if it was right or if it was wrong, but I'll leave that for a different podcast episode. So I like the fact that I could have some money that's decentralized. I love that you bring
that up because that's the example I always use, because people are like, what do we need decentralization for? But that's the specific example is like, hey, if you kind of disagree with the government a little bit and you want freedom to walk around without a mask, and all of a sudden the government says, hey, I saw that you contributed money to this protest. We're going to actually go after your bank accounts. And the thing that they did is they went after the cryptocurrency exchanges and said, hey, whoever deposited this funds from the crypto exchange, give us their information too. So they're actually able to kind of tap into the traditional fiat.
How do they know that? So walk walk me through that for a second, Stephen. So I have $1 in my green bank account. Yep. Okay. Everybody knows the green bank. Okay. And they were able to see me transfer that into a digital, transfer that into digital currency, and then they froze it. Like, to walk me through that.
They're able to see if you could, because a lot of people were donating via cryptocurrency because they couldn't do through centralized fundraising.
So now they see Jas Takhar.
They don't see Jas, but they see address ABC. That is your address. Send funds to a donation to this group. Everyone sees that transaction because the blockchain is transparent, it's open, and it's public. They don't know it's Jas, but when they see that you receive funds from the green bank, let's just say the green bank was allowed to convert those funds, then they go back to that green bank and said, hey, who sent that funds to that donation? We want their information. And
so, okay, so now there's one use of it for the regular Joe and Jane, right? Like, if you just feel like me, where, look, man, I want to have some money that is, off the radar, so to speak, right? What's another couple of uses that you see? Maybe it's for my real estate agents, maybe it's for my real estate clients, or just even outside, man. I don't really care where you take it.
I think, and what you brought up was interesting, because a lot of people think that the blockchain is anonymous, where it's pseudonymous. So I don't know it's Jas sending the funds, but I can see Jas's transaction. Now, if Jas is using Coinbase or CoinSquare or another exchange, and law enforcement subpoenas that exchange, they now know it's you. You have your KYC information. Now they can see every transaction that Jas did forever, however long to use that address. So I think that's important for the audience to know, because they think it's anonymous. No, once law enforcement can figure out whose address they have the benefit. They can see all your transactions.
See, I'm not really overly concerned about that, because it's not like I'm doing something illegal with my money. I just don't like that. If I wanted to donate to something that I believed was a positive initiative, for example, that I don't like them freezing my accounts. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I want to have it in the crypto world, right?
I think a use case that would be interesting to your audience is like the title fraud that I've seen go on, where people are basically able to sell properties because they're renting and the person's overseas. And, I think a lot of that would be, if it was based on the blockchain, anyone would be able to see, like, hey, that person doesn't have ownership to that title. Title's on the blockchain. They're not the ones that conducted that transaction. We're not going to turn over the house or whatever. You probably know better than me. But I think that's very interesting, is that could all be done on the blockchain, and that would be transparent. Everyone could see the transaction. Everyone would know the person, even if they had the ID, isn't that person, because they wouldn't be able to unlock that title from the blockchain to transfer it to the next person. And it's not just cryptocurrency and payments, it's also value. You're transferring value, you're transferring information, and that is secure. So I think that would be helpful in the industry like yours.
Now, are you confident in terms of, like, let me rephrase this. Are you like investing into Bitcoin yourself right now? And are you watching what's happening with what it's worth and what it's gone down to? And like, where's your thought process?
I have no here. I do invest in Bitcoin, but if I watched it based on just the price, I'd be completely bald right now. What I do like is NFT. So for instance, we talked about Gary Vee, been following him for 5-6 years. He comes out with the NFT project, and I say, hey, it might be $3,500 at the time, because Ethereum.
What is an NFT? We gotta explain.
It's a non-fungible token. So basically a digital asset that has a unique ID, so that nobody else can duplicate it, essentially, and that you have ownership of the asset. Similar to, like, if you had a piece of art, you want to know that the art is real. You want to know the provenance of that art. You want to know that it is from the artist that they said it was. And you want to know, hey, I'm the only one that has this art piece, and it's not a counterfeit. Same thing with digital assets, whether it's art or other things. So I had one of his digital assets. I purchased it, and it went up in price. It's probably down in price now. But I think I'm invested in his community. So I know who he is. I know a little bit enough about cryptocurrency and NFT to invest in that. I think where people go wrong is the Uber driver says, hey, have you heard of Dogecoin? It was just on Saturday Night Live. You should invest your life savings. And people are sending money to some random person that they don't know. And I think that's where the education piece comes in. And I think that's where a lot of people get burned, is they're trying to make that money too quickly. Better than same thing with real estate deals. The only reason you get scammed or something happens is that you took a shortcut somewhere, probably with due diligence.
And what a lot of people speak about when it comes to NFTs, why can't I just take a picture of the JPEG, or right click and save it as a JPEG, or just take a picture of something and say that I own it? What's the difference in doing that and actually owning an NFT?
It's because like the NFT has like almost like a digital fingerprint, so they know it's only you that has that NFT. And everyone talks about like, oh, I can just right click and save. It's like, well, why are people buying Michael Jordan rookie cards for hundreds of thousands of dollars? It's just a piece of cardboard with a picture on it. You can print out your own at Staples, but it doesn't have the provenance. It's not the actual rookie card. It wasn't distributed. It hasn't been graded or rated. So the digital assets have the same features that I think collectibles do.
And you mentioned something earlier, a word called smart contract. I want you to explain what that is as well for myself, because I know it. Again, maybe a smart contract I probably know up to like 10%. Right. I want to know what it is for my viewers and listeners, and then where can we make use of it in the coming year, 2 years, 3 years? Where do you see this going? Smart
contract, I like to give the example of like a vending machine. So if you go, you put $1 in the vending machine, you press A4 and you're expecting the Coke to come down. It's similar to that, right? There's no one sitting there at the vending machine making sure that the Coke's coming down. It's all done automatically.
I always thought that as a kid that there was somebody in the back that dropped your A4 Coke down. Go.
It's something automatically that's done because of the contract. Essentially, they know once you press A4, the electronics go down, it releases A4 and it comes down. Smart contract is programmed the same way. You said, hey, if Jas makes $100,000 this year, 5% is going to go to each of his staff, no matter what. As soon as they see that you've made $100,000, 5% would immediately go out to them. As I said, it's dumb in the sense that you can't really change that once you have it. The problems that we're seeing is that these companies, they're open smart contracts, so everyone can see the code that's written them. Hackers can see the code. So the hackers are trying to find vulnerabilities, because at the end of the day, it's people writing this code into these smart contracts. People make mistakes, and there's a lot of money housed into these smart contracts or affiliated with these smart contracts.
And so are the hackers are able to, using that same example, okay, so Jas makes $100,000. He wants to pay 3 of his staff every time he makes $100,000, 5% each. Are they going in, changing it to 10% and then diverting where the money goes?
No, they're almost like manipulating in the sense that suppose Jas didn't name who the employees were, and they go in and they put their name. So now all of a sudden you're paying 5% to them versus the employees, because you didn't hard code in the contract who specifically we're speaking about. So they're finding loopholes in the code. It's just like if you hit the vending machine twice on the side and A5 will drop out a Coke, it's the same thing, right?
Or you just tip over the whole vending machine, for example.
They've figured out ways to do that, and because you can't change the contract, there's nothing really you can do. There's no real kill switches for a lot of these smart contracts where it's like, oh, something's going to happen, we have to kill the switch. And that's why cybersecurity, smart contract, people coming in and auditing these contracts to make them legitimate. But remember, a lot of these smart contracts have $500-600 million. So these hackers are spending all day trying to find loopholes. Or they might send you a message and say, hey, Jas, remember that we want to pay out those 5% to people, and you assign and say, yeah, I want to do that. But it was really, this message they sent you was really sending them the full $100,000 once they met it, and you clicked on the wrong link, and all of a sudden your money's gone.
So from a security perspective, Stephen, what are some ways that the regular Joe and Jane can protect themselves?
I think being educated, okay. I think understanding that, if it's too good to be true, to maybe stay away from it, because a lot of these DeFi, decentralized financing protocols, they're offering 12%. And that's why people are sending their money there, because like, hey, this is guaranteed 12%. Yes, until that smart contract gets hacked, or that DeFi protocol, now it's 12% of zero. You get nothing, you have nothing. So I think people have to understand where they're going. I think always playing with money that you're willing to lose as well is the biggest thing. And, understanding at least what the project's about. But it's really hard if you're investing in these things. There's no way of telling, whether it's FTX that goes down or a small decentralized protocol that was offering 12% returns goes down. It's always hard to tell.
And when you say get educated, are we talking through, aside from, let me ask it this way. Aside from listening to this podcast today, watching you on LinkedIn, watching YouTube videos, where are some other places people can get educated about this?
Honestly, I think last one, YouTube, you can learn everything that you need to know. Everything is out there. Most of the information is open source.
Is there meetups? In-person meetups that you know of? And the reason I say that is because I talk a lot about in-person meetups in the business world, as well as the real estate investing world. I'm just curious if there's meetups, are you putting on anything, or do you know of anything, maybe locally in Toronto, but if you know of anything right across the world.
Yeah, Bitcoin Bay is like, they've been going since I think like 2015.
Is that based here in Toronto?
Yeah, based in Toronto. I forgot the place. I think Rex's is the name of the restaurant that they'll do. And you'll have 15, sometimes 40, 50, 60 people come out. They'll bring in speakers from either compliance or investment companies, and people just come and learn. So they have I would say a regeneration of people. People come to the city. They want to meet with other Bitcoin people who are interested in Bitcoin. They attend these meetups. Since the NFT craze, there's been a lot of Web3 type companies that have come into the space, but I haven't been to any of those events.
How is money made through NFTs? So as a creator, what are some ways that someone's listening and watching right now that they can actually take advantage of this technology to make money? Obviously, there's ways to invest into Bitcoin. Right. There's ways to invest into Ethereum. Those kind of being the top two, I would think. Is there anything else on that list that you would say, well, no, these are good investments in that world? Are the Doge coins out there still, or what's going on there?
Those are always tough, right? They rise and they fall just as quickly. So it's hard to say invest in something. I always say invest in what you're really interested in. Find projects that, catch your attention. As you're learning about these things, you're going to find interesting projects or something that resonates with you. I think for your audience, let's just say, hey, they're not great artists, but they're into real estate. They love, these luxurious buildings and homes, and they go on a thing like ChatGPT and AI, and they create generative art. So they create these, they put in a couple of prompts, and all of a sudden it takes some of the houses that they sold and add in some splash of color here, makes it into cartoons. They could actually go sell those. That's interesting collectibles for them that people would actually purchase. Yeah. I think that's tougher now because we've had a lot of people do the old cash grab in NFTs, like a camo with a cigar coming out of his bum is selling for $400,000. And it's all great until all the projects go down to $5 and then everyone loses.
Well, now we are, I feel like, going through a little bit of a storm in that world, right? And just like anything else, real estate goes up, it comes down. Now with real estate, we have the 100 years of data that it goes up and down upwards over time. But just like stocks, right? They go up, they go down. I mean, the NFTs are going through the same kind of, Bitcoin's going through the same thing right now, right?
Through a couple cycles. I started in 2018, which was the big crash of 2000. It went from 17,000, which nobody could ever believe, back down to 3,500. And then it went to 60,000 and back down. So I think we're at probably 16,000. But I think it's interesting in your world is that people should get involved a little bit, understanding. I feel like there's a lot of traditional industries like banking, like mortgages, like real estate companies, where, as you said, they don't really know anything about it. And having someone just come in and talk a little bit about, these are the things that you should be worrying about. Because I think a lot of people just read the headlines and say, oh, I'm staying away from blockchain and cryptocurrency, or, oh, I'm staying away from Bitcoin. Whereas they're this is interesting. There's been houses that have been sold for Bitcoin, especially in the States. These are interesting things where you can that's a conversation starter.
Well, that's why I wanted to have you on, brother. I knew this is, I feel like it's here to stay. Yeah. This is not a fad. You called it kind of in transition with the word of the 2.5, and will probably that being the transition right now. But this is here to stay. I think most people south of 30, that's what they speak in. They speak in NFTs. This is what they want to buy. This is what they want to invest into. They do want to get paid into it. Not that I've had anyone ask me specifically, but I hear these conversations being had. You mentioned AI and ChatGPT. I want to get your thoughts on it, man. What do you think of it? Are you using ChatGPT?
I haven't used it.
Okay, I have some thoughts on it. Go.
You go.
Man, I probably, when it first came out, and got really a lot of craze on social media and stuff like that, I still didn't touch it for probably the first couple of months. In the last, I'm going to say month, I probably am on that every single day.
Interesting.
At least once. In fact, with the core 4 or 5 people around me, it's on our desktops at all times because we're making use of it so much. For example, if I wanted to, not that anything, and I think everyone can tell who's ever watched an episode of mine knows that this is not scripted. But if I wanted to, I could literally say, I'm sitting down with Stephen Sargeant, and we're going to be speaking about blockchain. Right. Give me 7, you just prompt it. Literally, the more detailed of the prompt that you give it, the better results you're going to get. So for example, act as my assistant and give me 7 questions to ask around Bitcoin, blockchain, and it just spits out. And then it's literally, I generally say, give me more. And then you have another list. What I'm really using it for is some days I'm just not inspired in terms of which videos to shoot. And I just pop onto ChatGPT, give me 7 videos in and around investing into real estate. Give me 8 videos what real estate agents are asking online. So whatever it spits out, I just answer those questions. Like that's at the most basic level. But man, like I'm writing full blogs now. I'm giving it 7 points of a video that I did because I shot the video, so I know. For example, I kind of will have an idea of all the things that you and I spoke about. I'm going to go to ChatGPT, write me a 700 word blog on these 7 points that you and I just spoke about. And it just spits it out. I go make some changes to it. It's like the fastest thing I've ever seen in terms of giving you answers and actually giving you topic ideas and scripts.
I look at it like steroids, right? It's a supplement. You could take steroids and not work out and you're going to be fat, right? Or you could take steroids and eat healthy and you're going to be jacked. Everyone's going to think it's a steroids, but it's not just a steroids. It's more of a supplement. And I think me and you work very similar. Like give me like 5 points and I can riff off of those 5 points for the next 5 hours. I don't need to, if I see exactly what's written though, I'll just be stumbling.
100%.
So I think it works better for people like you. And it's funny because I produce a podcast for a large company and the host did it. He's like, here's the 7. And they were good, but it lacks sometimes a little bit of context.
Oh,
100%. I think that's the beauty of it. That gives people like us like, oh, let me just add in my piece here. Let me add in my experience. That makes it so much easier, right? Versus you sitting there, what am I going to speak about today? Okay, I need to talk about this or like what's trending. It can like spit out those so quickly. That's what I like about it. I think that's what I'll be as a media agency. That's where I can see me and my team using it more of like, hey, let's talk about all these subjects or what's trending in the news. I don't have time to read every single article. Just give me like the basis of what's going on and let me riff off of it.
Well, now I think they actually had a pro account that I just didn't subscribe to, but I think it's like $20 a month or something. And I was like, for sure, I'll have it. It's just a nice. Yeah. I love the analogy of the steroids, right? But it's just a nice little a tool, extra tool to have for the guys and girls that are scared of maybe losing their job to actual AI. I don't think that's going to happen. I think you can possibly lose your job though to somebody who uses AI. And that's my distinguish, that's how I differentiate and explain it to people that, look, AI is not going to take over your job right now in the near future. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I can tell you what will replace your job is somebody who uses AI because it makes them faster. Right. It just makes them quicker at doing things. Like I have content writers. I have tons of videographers. When my guys are looking for titles, like the ones that use AI, well, you're just going to take that off of my head and you're just bringing more value to the table. The ones that are not, well, then I'm going to find the people that are because they're making my life easier.
I think the real key there is that they're already doing the work.
Yes.
Right? I think people are like, oh, I can just use AI, I'll make money, I'll just create a blog. But if you've never actually written a blog, you're still good. You're not going to use AI any more than you would have. That's the whole reason. Just like you could have wrote out a blog easily by just making point form notes or copying certain things from other people. I just think like the content creators, it's going to enhance what they do, but it's never going to replace what they do because at the end of the day, they've already done the work of creating content. Now they're just figuring out ways that they can use this to either speed up their work or make the initial thought process a lot quicker.
And then like the next version of AI that's already out there is like you can literally feed the audio of this conversation, Stephen, and then I can have someone like a video of someone else say everything that I fed it. The problem with that is that if you're actually looking into building a brand, a personal brand specifically, you can't have like I don't even know if this is the right word, but like a digitized face of someone else. That's not going to help you connect the brand. I think why people connect with you is because they see you and then they get to make your kind of make the call on you. Okay, I like this guy. He's a little too crazy for me. I don't like him, right? Because I get that all the time. And so for somebody who's thinking, I'm just going to, feed a script into the AI, you can write it in there and then a video pops up. That's good. It's maybe better than nothing, but to really make a connection, you got to put yourself on camera.
And AI is never going to tell that story you did about starting a business and, losing partners and having to flip the bill yourself. AI is never going to be able to tell that story for you. And I think that's what's drawing people in. Oh, he's been through it. Oh, he's done it. Or, hey, what's it like scaling a team? And this is what you did to scale a team and you paid before you kind of had the projects. AI can write about it, but they can't show you from the weeds, right? And I think that's what having a personal brand, that's what attracts us to the best people in the industry is like they're telling us stories of what they've gone through and it resonates because we're going through the exact same.
It's funny. We're it just kind of shifted organically into personal branding because most of the time I have a real estate agent sitting on this couch here or real estate investors. My real estate agents completely kind of understand why they should do personal branding, but they necessarily don't do it.
Right.
Okay. But that's majority of humans. I'm pushing my real estate investors, believe it or not, to build a personal brand, because then I think if you tell your stories of investing into real estate, you're going to be able to have other people connect with you. And when you're investing into real estate, the one obstacle you're about to hit at some point is the ability to get financing. And one easy way to get around that is to do joint ventures. But you're only going to be able to raise money and get joint ventures if people are connected with you. If they know you, like you, or trust you, just like in any business. Yeah. What I like about the fact that you're here today is that you're going to be able to speak about building a personal brand completely outside of my industry. Like, you're not in the real estate industry. Right. You know what I mean? And so sometimes I think they just get tired of the same voice, i.e. Jas Takhar's voice, saying the same shit over and over again. And so what and how has personal branding helped you?
For me, it's like, it's caused me to be well known. No, it's caused me to be known well. I think there's well known. Everybody wants to be well known. They want to be the biggest speaker. They want to be on the biggest billboards, on the biggest stages. But known well means, hey, people are sending me deals. So when I think of like real estate and content, we talked just before this recorded, I'm sending that person to you. Hey, you want to do content? You're into real estate? Go straight to Jas. I don't have to think about it. And it's like deal flow just because I feel like I know you, and this is the first time we met, but I feel like I know you. I know exactly what you do, what kind of content you're putting out. And I think people overthink content. I treated my personal brand early on like a business. I used to follow people that were using LinkedIn for sales of companies and sales of products and services. And I'm like, if the same methodology goes into selling products, I'm just selling myself. So I'll use the same tactics. I'll borrow inspiration. I've taken some of your podcast themes and I've reached out to you and said, hey, I'm taking this one. It's really great. And I think what has happened is caused me to be well known in the industry. So then people come to me and ask questions, which then produces more content that I can put out there, attracting more people to me. So now everyone comes to me for anything because I'll find out the answer, or I'll have people that know the answer and I'll solve problems. And I think you know that better than anyone else. Sales is about solving problems, not about
100%.
making money. So when you solve the problems, then all of a sudden you can spit out a media company because you knew that was an issue that everyone was having. You were doing it naturally for you. Now you have another company. I think what people don't realize is that they don't see the end goal, right? You can't say, hey, put out content and you're going to get A, B, and C, because you don't know what they're going to get. And it's going to be probably infinitely more, even if you said they would get A, B, and C. Whereas people, they'll do whatever it takes to get a certificate in school, right? Yeah. A degree. You told them to jump up and down while they're giving a presentation. They're going to do exactly that because they know if they do that, they get the degree. And because that's the result. Whereas content is like, by producing something, you don't know what they're, I don't know. Like, why am I here today is because I decided to like follow some of Gary Vee's advice, put out some podcasts when nobody was doing podcasts. And what I've realized is like, oh, people enjoy consuming the content I put out, just like I consume other people's content. And it's career insurance to me. And I think you make a good point about the real estate investors, because if they're well known, anytime a real estate deal between family members, like, hey, we're trying to unload this laundromat. Oh, I know Jas, he's on TV. He's talking about this. Let maybe ask him what he thinks about it.
You know, you spoke about the return kind of on the investment. You said it a little differently, but that's where my head kind of goes, where if you're like real estate agents, for example, and in every business they're the same. I can take it to I'm looking at my main videographer / cinematographer, Jas, who's been with me for 2 years. Like, he does not even produce as much content as he should. Right. You know, he'd be getting way more business from the outside if people actually saw his content more, his behind the scenes shit more. You know what I mean? Every day, every single day they should be putting out content. But like from a real estate agent's perspective, when you spoke about the certificate and stuff like that, real estate agents, if you tell them right now, Stephen, to do a just listed, just sold, and what that is like a card that gets sent out in the mail. They'll do that in 2 seconds, right? Because somebody would say, well, if you send out 1,000 of these, you might get 2 phone calls. And then out of the 2 phone calls, you might get a deal, you might not get a deal. Where with personal branding, it's not that quick fix. You got to do this for a year, but then the business comes to you. You don't need to do just listed, just sold. You don't need to door knock. You don't need to cold call. People are coming to you, and now they've already kind of sorted to make in their brains to say, you know what, there is something about Jas, there is something about Stephen that I want to get to know more about. The business actually starts coming to you rather than you always going out to get the business. It builds that reputation way before they even actually meet you.
And it's funny because I heard this analogy. It might have been Gary Vee, it might have been someone else. It's like the bee and the flower, right? You probably were the bee. You were going out, door knocking, sending out this flyer. You were the bee going on, and you could get the job done that way. But now you turn into the flower. You're creating content that's now attracting the bees to come to you. And now you have a bigger pasture. You have a lot more. Now bees want to come work with you. Bees want to come work for you. Bees want to be on your show. And that's the way I think I look at content, is like, if I can put out the most content, it's going to attract the most amount of people that I want to be attracted to. But I think the reality is Jas, like, people want to do the easy thing. It's easy to do a just listed. It's much harder to sit down here, look at the camera, have somebody record it, pay somebody, or go on Fiverr or Upwork, pay somebody. It's to them, that's not reasonable. It's so much easier. It's just like when people are looking for jobs, they just go on LinkedIn. They'd rather apply for 100 jobs than just sit there and like, hey, let's put out a piece of content about what I've learned in my role. And that's why I've realized is that people don't really want to work. They want to get the most amount of return for the least amount of effort. And I'm not saying that just about your community. Like, that's how I was too. So I get it and I understand it, because I was very much like that too. But what we've probably realized, by putting out content, it's a lot more work. But the return is so much higher, and eventually you get paid for more than the work you're doing.
At the start, when you were doing it, I'm curious, was it like, I'm not going to start with video first, maybe I'll move to like a long form content, writing content on LinkedIn? Where were your insecurities at around content?
I was very new to the industry. So me putting out content about how to be an anti-money laundering officer is a little tough when you're only a couple months into being an anti-money laundering officer. But what I did is, when I started putting out that content, I got people that wanted to at least be me, right? So there were students that are like, hey, I'm in school, I want to do a job just like you. And they were the ones reaching out to me. And that's how I started creating my content.
And did you start with video, by the way?
I started, I think, just written.
Got it.
I did do a video one time. I did a video where we were raising funds for human trafficking.
Were you ultra comfortable the first time that you did the video?
No. I have like a huge nose, like, you know what I mean? It's like sloping forehead. Like, I'm not really exactly out there doing video, but I've always been
huge nose. It's so funny what we pick out on ourselves. Like, I never even thought about your nose, which is for everyone to hear this now. Like, this man's been sitting with me for whatever it's been, close to an hour, and I see you on camera all the time. I've never thought about your nose, but you think that's what people are thinking about. And we're all like this. I have my own things. But nobody's really actually thinking about you as much as you think that they're thinking about you. You know what I mean?
And I think once you stop caring what people think about you, I think that's really the unlock. Once you really stop caring what people think, I think you get and I know it's easier said than done, but I was never worried about, like, I'm going to be rejected. Then you realize people are going to say things no matter whether you're doing something or not. So I just embraced it, right? And I, encouraged more people. And what I've noticed is that, and probably you've noticed, is that now you're a voice where people that didn't feel they had a voice before can now say things because you've already gone out and showed them that it's okay. And that's why I realized, like, the things I've been scared to say the most are the things I put out there, because it's created almost like a cover for people to say, like, they can now just comment and send me a DM and say, thank you for saying that. Because what I saw early on in Canada is foreign professionals weren't getting a fair crack at jobs because they didn't have Canadian experience, even though most of our investigations were about international wire transfers. So what is the Canadian experience? And when I brought that up, that was actually my first video, or I think it was my first video or my first post that went viral on LinkedIn, because people were like, because if you're a foreign professional, you're definitely not posting that on LinkedIn and alienating yourself from opportunities. But me, born, raised in Canada, never worked anywhere else, it was easy for me to talk on their behalf because I saw the struggles they were going through. And that all happened because of the content I was putting out.
So what's this new podcast going to be about?
I'm actually coming up with a new one with Web3, which is similar to you, where it's like, I just want to talk. I love talking to interesting people, and I'm like seeing all these interesting things people are doing on LinkedIn. I'm like, I just want to reach out and have a conversation with them. I don't want it to be like a coffee. I just want to share. What I've realized during the pandemic is I was having all these amazing conversations with people, but I was the only one benefiting from it. And that was really when I started to do it. It's called We Were on a Break. It was just a podcast of me speaking to other industry professionals. And I think this one will be a little bit more Web3 focused, but I do produce a podcast for one of the biggest companies doing blockchain analytics. So these are the guys that figure out who you are when you're sending out transactions on the blockchain.
What company is that?
Chainalysis is one of the bigger companies.
And what do they do exactly? Sorry.
So they do blockchain analytics. So they can say how much funds are being sent to darknet markets or illicit actors or terrorist financing. They have all this information, sanctioned entities, and they're the ones that are kind of they provide the tool that people can actually use to visualize the transactions on the blockchain.
So they brought you in just to do the podcast? Is that how that's set up?
Yeah, and I do training for them as well. I send them so speaking of content, I sent them a 20-minute video of all the things I thought I could do for them. And they're like, the podcast seems interesting. Let's run with the podcast.
And this new one that you're doing, are you going to go down the path of like, this is the Steve Sargeant show, podcast? What are you thinking in that sense?
I think it's going to be like more of me talking to industry professionals.
Okay.
Not a lot. Like everyone wants to talk to the Gary V's when it comes to branding.
Yeah.
Whereas there's so many other people like yourself that I want to talk to because you have your foot on the ground.
Yep.
And you're also talking to those people. So maybe not the people at the tippity top,
Yep.
but the people that are interested in crypto or they bought NFTs, but nobody's talking about. I think of like people like Chameleonaire or it's like random artists that are doing stuff that people probably didn't even know
Sure.
that they were a part of this community.
Yeah.
Talking to people like
and
that.
why not? And I'm just curious to get your feedback. Like, why not make it more wide and talk about all your other passions and stuff like that? Like, why so focused on the Web3 aspect?
I think that's because I'm in the industry I'm in. That's
Got
the
it.
more I'm focused on. And those are the people that I don't know exactly what they're doing too, right? I understand like DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, but I don't really have a good enough understanding. So being able to talk to people in these areas that, as you said, people that don't have a necessarily great understanding, I want to talk more and highlight more from those people to learn more about it.
I think your timing is going to be perfect. I'm so proud of what you do, man, on LinkedIn and all the content that you put out there, brother. I can't wait till this podcast comes out. You got to send it to me right away. I'm going to share it with my community because I really want to be the voice, at least from the real estate perspective, because that's kind of, again, my network in my community, investors and agents. I want them to get more educated on this because I know this is where it's going. It's heading there. It's already like, if it wasn't for maybe this crash that we've seen, and call it a crash or what I'd like to call it correction in the NFT space, as well as like the Bitcoins of the world, I think we would be hearing about it a lot more. But this is just like I've seen in real estate before. There's a dip. Nobody talks about it. I mean, from a media perspective, they like to talk about real estate because it gets people talking because everybody has like homes, you know what I mean? But I think we're just going to start to see the rise again in terms of all things kind of blockchain. And so I think your timing's going to be perfect. I can't thank you enough, man. I hit you up and you were like, yeah, just tell me when, let's make this happen. And I know you're all over the place. Like you have a bunch of speaking engagements and stuff like that. Drop that because this episode's coming out like literally in 2 days. Okay. So once this comes out, people can catch you everywhere else that you're like either doing digital stuff virtually or in person.
Doing a lot of virtual stuff. I'm going to be speaking in front of a Dubai crowd in a couple of days. It's like 4:00 in the morning. I didn't really do the math on the time zones. But before we leave, I want to thank you. Because when I was working with another organization and we actually use Fidigu Media and we stopped using them and we were going a different route. And I said, hey, Jas, thanks so much. And you said, hey, you know what? If you're trying to do a media thing, this is what you need to do. This is what the process you need to put, the people you need to put in place. And that helped me start my own content. And that's when I started my own content creation career. Whereas you could have said, hey, you're not using us anymore. Like, good for you. Go do it on yourself.
That's small time thinking.
Good luck. And it's funny that at full circle, we're back here kind of having this conversation. But I think these aren't the things that you promote about yourself that people don't see behind the scenes is how you take care of the people around you, even if it's not benefiting you or your organization. And I think that's what people need to understand about you.
The check's in the mail for that testimonial. I really, really appreciate you. Thank you for doing this with me, Stephen.
All right,
Thank
so
you,
much,
brother.
man.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.